Welcome back to Topics in Psychology. I'm Dr. Sharon Eve, psychotherapist, author, and educator, and today I want to talk about the dysfunctional family system. I once heard there was a functional family, and they lived in Minnesota, and they laminated them and put them in a museum. I never met them, but okay. So in the dysfunctional family, there are two things we can look at to try to understand what went on and what may still be influencing us in our lives and our relationships. There are certain roles that people will take on in the dysfunctional family system. There's the primary person with a primary disorder, alcoholic, rageaholic, schizophrenic. It could be a lot of different things, but everybody revolves around that person. They're not aware of their own feelings, except anger usually, and they often come from a dysfunctional family themselves. So they're modeling their behavior on something they saw growing up. So is that person's partner, who we call the primary enabler or the codependent. What enabling is specifically is when we come between someone and the consequences of their choices or the consequences of their behavior. We just kind of add that extra padding so they don't have to feel the result, the mess that they've made. That the codependent also doesn't have a language of feelings, probably also came from a pretty dysfunctional family. And then with whatever dance the two parents are doing or other adult figures in the system, along come the kids. And there are four typical roles that kids may take on. In my family, there were only 3 kids, so I took on 2 of the roles. And when I grew up and left, my youngest brother played one role and then he stepped into mine because there was a need for those functions to be filled. The oldest child in the dysfunctional family we refer to as the family hero. They get A's in school, they're captain of the football team or the glee club, and they're very responsible, and very often they're kind of like a mini adult in the system. And oftentimes I'll see them in therapy when they're 30, 40, 50, and when we look back at their lives, they were adults by the time they were like 10. So they've had a lot of years of stress. So that child is just too perfect to match up to. The next child that comes along doesn't even try. That's the family scapegoat. This is the kid who gets into trouble at school, at home. The way that he or she deals with their feelings is by all these behaviors that get attention or that create upset. So the upset that's underneath the surface comes out. The next child that comes along in the family system is the lost child. And where people look at the scapegoat child and say, well, that's the problem in this family. The lost child provides the function of being, oh, we're really doing well in this family. Look at how good this kid is. And this is the child, while everybody's having an argument over dinner, they're sitting there reading their book. The brother was just younger than me. He was the family lost child. Everybody looked at him and he was so perfect. And he didn't get involved in the conflicts at the dinner table. He would go and play with his baseball cards with his friend down the street. The youngest child in the alcoholic family or similarly dysfunctional family we refer to as the family mascot. They provide diversion through laughter and jokes, and that way they reduce the tension in the system. Now that we have our cast of characters, we need to give them a script to operate off of. So there's certain rules that people adhere to in the dysfunctional family. Only the person with the primary disorder that everyone revolves around is usually the only one who's allowed to be angry, possibly the other parent, but not quite so overtly angry. The kids have a really tough time with the tension in the family, but they don't talk about what's going on. They don't talk about their feelings. They don't rock the boat. And they find ways to feel safe or to get a sense of identity that's separate from what the family offers. I'd like to wind up this video with something that I hope will be really useful for you. A series of questions. I call them therapy questions because they're the same kind of questions I ask in therapy. Given the family system that you were raised in, what were the roles that people took on? What was your role? Have you continued to play that role in successive relationships? Were there certain rules in the system that have had an influence on you? If you never learned how to identify your feelings, that's going to be problematic if you want to have a healthy, significant, intimate relationship. So go ahead and look at some of these things, see how they apply to you, and we'll look forward to seeing you at our next video.